What's up, guys? It's Rey-Jay back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's happening with SPY, Tesla, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers, and break down what's happening with the economic calendar moving forward, talk about other things that are coming out that are very important for tomorrow, and you should be watching for as time progresses. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please smash the like button. It not only benefits me, it benefits the entire community as a whole. Anyways, why is tomorrow such a big day? The answer is we have Nvidia's earnings, which is going to be a major catalyst for us moving forward. So I'll be talking more about those before I break down more details about these charts. What happened today, though, was very interesting for SPY. We did see a dip, which is what I was expecting. But then I called out that we have this 20 EMA right over here. This ended up trending upwards. The last time we hit this 20 EMA, this is the green line you see right here. The market got a nice bounce. This time we touched it and then we saw a little rebound, but the market is still range bound. So from the way I see things, okay, the market does not have a true direction. We're not super bullish on SPY. We're not super bearish. We're just stuck in this big range. What is the range? Well, it's very simple. Every time we dip down towards 558, if not 555, we see SPY get bought back up. Every time we push all the way up to about the 563 zone, 562, 563, we tend to get rejected and we're just stuck. We've been doing this for the past week and a half, going back and forth and back and forth. So I think that Nvidia is going to be the big catalyst that's going to cause the market to break one of these levels. Whether we break all-time highs and start pushing towards 570, or if we end up getting a big dip, we end up losing the 555 support, SPY could see a big move to the downside depending on Nvidia's earnings, in my opinion. So that's why I just want to break down some details about tomorrow, then I'll start talking about these charts. The first thing worth mentioning is there's not really much data coming out for tomorrow. Tomorrow is going to be Wednesday, August 28th, 2024. The data is very minor. We just have some mortgage data coming out before the market opens, and everything else is just super minor. It's nothing too crazy. We have some bill auctions at 11:30 and also 1 p.m., and everything is just going to be very quiet. So we have the first quiet day of the week until data becomes more intense for Thursday and Friday. But for now, tomorrow is going to be very minor. Now, for more sentiment data about how the market's looking, we're still neutral. We're not super greedy. We're not super fearful. We're still in the middle, and that's because the market is range bound. Momentum is still a little bit more in favor of greed as there are buyers trying to hold the market up, but this is based off the position we are in relative to before. So the market is still close to all-time highs. That's why the momentum indicator is at greed. If the market was at a lower value, this would be a lot more different, but so far it's showing the market's holding up at high values. Now, when it comes to the puts and call option positioning, this is indecisive. Are we about to see this thing dump really hard if the market were to turn into a more bullish phase, or are we going to see a big spike in the upwards direction as we see sentiment shift and a lot more puts being bought, more shorts piling into the markets? That, my friends, will depend on Nvidia's earnings. And then volatility is still neutral. It's waiting for Nvidia's earnings. So that's what the market's essentially doing. So when is Nvidia's earnings? It's going to be tomorrow after the market closes. In the morning tomorrow, we have Kohl's, Foot Locker, and a very few amounts of these retail earnings, very minor ones. And then after market close, that's when we're going to be looking for a massive move. Why is Nvidia so important? Well, one thing worth mentioning is the fact that Nvidia is a company that has its hands in so many different sectors. It affects, all these companies involved with semiconductors. It affects Tesla. It affects many tech stocks. It affects Meta, and the list goes on. So it's going to have a big effect on tech. It's going to have a big effect on semiconductors. It's going to have a big effect on the entire market. But it's not just because of Nvidia directly. It's also because of these market makers. So what they do is, and I want you guys to listen very carefully to this. Okay, this is a secret about the markets. The market is very manipulated and they use data as an excuse to do things that's advantageous for themselves. So what do I mean by that? If Nvidia pumps and it's more advantageous to pump the market, they're going to use Nvidia as a reason to just start buying up SPY, start pushing up the S&P 500, the Nasdaq, the Dow. They're going to use it as an excuse. And the same thing goes vice versa. If Nvidia dumps and they want to trick people and start dumping things, they're going to use Nvidia as the excuse and they may start dumping things based off that. So yes, it depends on Nvidia's earnings, and they're going to use that as a reason to either pump the whole market or dump it. That's what I believe is going to most likely happen. It's not only because of the fact that Nvidia affects these different companies, but it's also because of manipulation. So what do I see from Nvidia moving forward? Nvidia is arguably one of the most important stocks in the world. I do agree with that because of how many eyes are on it and how much attention it gets from the media and all these different outlets out there. And you also have to account for the fact that it's a massive company worth trillions and it's going to be looking for some interesting volatility. So tomorrow we're going to be looking to see what their guidance looks like. It's coming out after the market ends up closing. We're going to be looking to see if they have strong guidance or not. That's going to be key for us. We're also going to be looking to see if this ends up seeing a big bounce to improve its market cap into the trillions or not. And then we'll be looking for their revenue and their EPS to see if it's aligned with expectations. Now, we're expecting basically growth around 112%. That's for the fourth quarter to about $28.7 billion. I think that's year over year. That's what they're expecting for how things are going to be looking. And we're also expecting, once again, about $31.7 billion overall. That's what the forecast is going to be. We're going to be looking for their guidance. And then besides that, we'll be looking for EPS and other things like that. But the important announcements that Jensen Huang makes about their products, how they're looking in terms of demand and the concerns that are coming out, that's going to be key for them, especially with the new chips coming out for AI. I can't wait to see what they say. Are they going to pump the markets or dump them? We'll just have to wait and see. So with that being said, guys, what do I see for the market approaching Nvidia's earnings? What do I think is going to happen? What is my view? And here's the answer, okay? And when it comes to the markets, I think we're going to be very choppy tomorrow, very sideways. And we're actually starting to show signs of that today. Today's SPY dipped, pumped, then and after hours it's dumping again. So it's just going back and forth and back and forth. I think we're going to likely see that. Now, we might dip a little bit tomorrow morning to retest our 20 EMA in the 559 area, then get bought back up and just continue to consolidate. I think that's going to be the most likely possibility, especially because there's not really much data coming out tomorrow. But do not be fooled by it. Don't be scared. Don't be fooled, because whatever happens, if we were to lose 558, then I'd be looking for 555. Our levels still remain. You could watch which way this is going to go based off our levels. But regardless of what happens, the real move is going to come based off Nvidia's earnings. So I think tomorrow is going to be a little bit of a dip coming towards at least the 559 area. If they try to dump it a little bit lower, it is it is possible they try to trick us. But don't fall for anything. Just know that what matters most is Nvidia's earnings. Even if they try to dump things or pump things, it does not matter. What matters is going to be what we get from Nvidia's earnings. And that's going to be the bigger determiner of the actual move. So I presume we're going to see a lot of consolidation, a little dip tomorrow, then lots of consolidation in this range between 558 and 562. And then I think that Nvidia will cause a much bigger move. Now, is this going to be a head and shoulders like structure that's about to play out? For confirmation of this, you need to see us lose 555. If that breaks, there's going to be a big dump coming, and we have a gap to fill into the 540s. Or are we going to be starting to rally? If we end up breaking the all-time high, we get above 565, we're going to be looking for this to push for 568 and eventually 570. It all depends on Nvidia. Unfortunately, I'm not a fortune teller. I can't make any promises. So look for consolidation tomorrow, and then we'll see what Nvidia causes. For Nvidia, we look pretty good from a technical standpoint. We're actually holding up in this range very nicely, and technically speaking, it does look a little bit more bullish. It does look that way because of the fact that we have these higher highs and higher lows being made. But I'm not going to make any promises because with earnings, you never know. Technicals are not going to be everything. So it's very simple. The way you'd play this is very, very simple, guys. If it breaks 130, this thing is going up to 135 plus, if not the 140s. If we end up losing support at 122, which is very close to where our 4-hour 50 EMA happens to be, I think we easily dump all the way down to at least 117 or lower, down to that imbalance. So will we get the rug pull, or are we about to get a big break? Depends on earnings. For now, we're just range bound. So I think tomorrow we're going to be dipping down to about the 126.5 area. Tip a couple of points to get bought back up and just continue to consolidate. But then the big move will come depending on earnings. So we have to wait for that. Now, one thing that's worth noting is that crypto is dumping so far. Is crypto going to dump because they're about to pump money into equities and pump the markets, or is it the opposite? Are they about to get ready for a sell-off? I can't answer that question because of Nvidia's earnings. Basically, if we break 60,500, there's going to be a big pump coming to Bitcoin. And if we end up dumping, we're going to be looking for basically 58,000 as our support. Otherwise, we dip to the 56,000 area. I presume that Bitcoin is going to get bought back up a little bit tomorrow to 60,000. We'll see if we reject off that or not. So look for a little bit of a push, and we'll see if we reject. This is looking weaker than the markets. For ES, just like SPY, it's completely range bound. Every time we hit 5650 around that area, we reject. Every time we get close to about the 5600 area, we do get bought back up. Today we dipped to just above 5600, then we got bought back up, and we're just continuing to trade sideways. So tomorrow, I think this imbalance fills. It takes us down a little bit lower to about the 5620 area, maybe a little bit below that. Then we get bought back up and consolidate. I think that's going to most likely be the case. Now, just know that this could be a head and shoulders. We have a left shoulder that could be forming here, a right head right here, then a right shoulder right here. We will see if that ends up playing out. For confirmation of a break, you need to see us lose 50 580 at least. If we lose that, then there's going to be a dump coming to at least the lower 5500s actually. So there's going to be a big dump on ES if we lose that. If we break the high at 5670, I think we're going up to about the 5700s. So it all depends on Nvda. We do look like we're going to dip a little bit tomorrow morning, then start to consolidate. That's all I see. But then it all depends on Nvidia from there. Let me just go back here. Tesla looks a little bit more bearish, technically speaking. Why do I say that? Because we are making lower highs. We had this high at 228. We came down at a lower high, and we're consistently doing that, which is not the best of signs. If we don't hold 208, there's a risk of Tesla dumping all the way down to 202. If we manage to break past our EMAs, at least 212, if not 215, we're going to turn back up to fill this imbalance towards 220. So break 212 and 215, we turn bullish. Lose the support at 208, we turn bearish. We're going to be looking for a dump towards 202, and we will see which way we end up moving. That's going to be very key for how things end up developing. So be very, very patient nonetheless. So in my personal opinion, I think that Tesla has some downside potential. It does look like it may dip lower looking at the current trend as we're making lower highs. But whether or not we get a dump depends a lot on what happens with Nvidia's earnings. Why is that? Yes, it does look like we might dip a little bit tomorrow. Yes, but that's not going to be the real move. The real move is going to come on Thursday once we get Nvidia's earnings. One thing worth mentioning is that Nvidia is a key partner for Tesla, providing them with semiconductors and the innovation necessary for their Dojo supercomputer. So I think that it's going to be very dependent on that. We look more bearish approaching the earnings, but then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For NQ, technically the trend is bearish. Technically it is because we're making lower highs, right? We had this high here, we came down, made a lower high, came down, made a lower high. So it is trending downwards, but it all depends on our levels. We haven't lost critical support yet. So in my opinion, okay, if you want to be bullish, we got to try to break at least above this high. If we could get above 19,800, this will be pushing into the 20,000 area. If we end up losing 19,400, however, our 200 EMA, I see us dumping towards the low 19,000s. This does resemble a head and shoulders like structure. It looks a little bit more bearish to me, so it does favor downside a little bit more. However, I can't promise anything. Even though it does look like it may dip a little bit tomorrow, the trend is a little bit more bearish. No promises could be made. It depends on what Nvidia gives us and what kind of manipulation they try to pull off. So we'll see how that goes. For the QQQ, we look like we might dip a little bit tomorrow. We did push, so we're kind of stuck between these EMAs, basically. That's what I'm trying to say. When we hit the 20 EMA, we kind of rejected here, so we have resistance at 477. Our support's at 472. I called this out yesterday that we might test 472 and to watch and see if we get a balance, because that's where our 50 EMA happens to be. So I presume we're going to be dipping back down towards the 473 area, get bought back up, and just consolidates tomorrow. And then whether or not this trend continues depends on Nvidia's earnings. As you guys could tell, we look more bearish on the triple Q. We look this way because of the fact that we're making lower highs, but it's very simple, okay? If we lose 472 after Nvidia's earnings, if that's the main move, this is going to be dumping down easily to 464. If we're bullish and we get a nice break, this could end up getting a bounce. If we break past 480, look for a big push. Now, the QQQ and the NASDAQ look more bearish. They look like they're going to dip lower from a technical standpoint. Technicals are not everything. It depends on NVIDIA's earnings, so we'll see. But just be very prepared for that. Be careful with it because of what I'm seeing. Aapl looks pretty good. We actually broke this high right here. If we hold above 228, we're going to be looking for 230 to fill this imbalance. If not, if we end up losing 226, we turn back down. I think what's going to happen is we dip down to the 226s, get bought back up, and then we just consolidate. I think that's going to most likely happen. Then we might see a little push. But then whether or not we push higher, it will also depend on NVIDIA. So I'll be waiting to see. But this looks like it's building strength. It looks more bullish than bearish. It's still outperforming the market. Might be a little dip in a bounce that comes. Palantir came down to my target. I was talking about 30.7 yesterday. Lo and behold, that's where we're currently at. With double top leg structure, we look more bearish. If we were to break 31.34, we turn back up. If we end up losing 30.5, I'll be looking for a dip down to at least this imbalance fill towards 29.5. So from a technical standpoint, we have a double top. We are looking more bearish. I am favoring the downside a little bit more on Palantir from a technical standpoint. Will that happen? It depends on NVIDIA's earnings. Same thing with Supermicro. It depends on NVIDIA. We have a bearish structure, technically speaking. I did call this out yesterday that it might pop a bit and start dipping. And so far, this does favor downside. It looks to me like it might be dipping towards 520 tomorrow. Now, whether it continues to to fall below 500 depends on Nvidia's earnings. We might test 520 tomorrow morning, and then after Nvidia's earnings, we'll see if we bounce back up towards 580 or if we continue to fall into the 400s. So look for a dip tomorrow morning, and we'll see what Nvidia causes. That's the most likely possibility. For Rivian, I mentioned to you all that this might dip a little bit towards the support around this 14 area, and watch and see if we get a bounce off that. That's close to what happened. So far, this is looking pretty good. We have this resistance to watch for around 14.7. If we break that, I'll be looking for the 15.2 area. If we end up losing, basically 14.07 will be dipping back down. I think tomorrow this might try to push a little bit higher and get closer to 15, and then we'll see if you reject or not. But looking at Rivian, the 4 hours looking a little bit more bullish. It looks like it wants to push higher, and we'll see what kind of reaction we get. This will depend on Nvidia, but it's looking pretty good. It might try to push tomorrow, and then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For SoFi, we look pretty good right now. We're holding support very, very nicely. I did call this out yesterday. It might dip back down to a 7.5, testing the previous resistance and try to bounce. That's exactly what happened. We called the move exactly. So now I think that this might consolidate. I think it's going to be entering a consolidation phase because 7.8 tends to be tough resistance. As you guys saw today, our support tends to be down here around this 7.62 area. So I presume we're just going to see some consolidation, and then whether or not we get a bounce depends on what we get from earnings. So that's going to be very, very important. I'll be watching to see if that ends up being the case. So I think tomorrow we're going to dip back down to about 7.6, come back up and just consolidate. And whether or not we get a big break depends on Nvidia's earnings. Will that pump us to 8, or will we see a big rug pull towards 7.27? We'll just have to give it some time. For the IWM Russell 2000, we're kind of projecting right here. One thing worth mentioning is that we're still riding this trend line very nicely, but we have this 217 area that's going to be tested tomorrow. So I think we might dip a little bit tomorrow. If 217 doesn't hold us, we dip down to about the 216 area, which is where the trend line happens to be. So I presume 216 to 217 is going to be tested, and then don't turn too bearish after that. I mean, we might test the support, but Nvidia will determine if we get a big bounce back into the 220s or not. So tomorrow, look for a dip on the IWM back to the support I called out, and we'll see what the reaction happens to be. Will we get bought back up towards 220, or will we see a rug pull? We'll just have to wait and see. For a few more guys, I'm going to be a little bit faster now because I'm kind of running out of time. AMD is dipping a little bit, so we're looking at our support right here around 149. If we lose that, we're going to be dipping back down towards 145. And if we break past 152, we turn back up. We're just kind of range bound right now, so I think it might just consolidate tomorrow, maybe dip a little bit, and then we'll see what happens with Nvidia's earnings. That's going to determine if we get a big bounce or not. ARM is coming back down. One thing that I like is the fact that even though it's trying to rebound, it's still showing, signs of consolidation. It may even start to dip lower. If we don't hold 129, look for a dip back down to about 127. And if we hold above 130, look for a bounce. This might dip towards 129, just consolidate for now. And we'll see if we get a big rug pull below 125 or not, or if we break out. To me, it looks like this might rebound a bit, then maybe dip lower, but we'll just have to wait and see depending on Nvidia. Coinbase is currently dipping, but I just want to call out that we're going to be looking at this support right here at this 192 area. If we lose 192, I'll be looking for 188, then eventually the gap fill, which takes us all the way down to the lower 180s. And to be bullish, you want to break past 200. We look more bearish from a technical standpoint. We do favor downside. I think we might rebound tomorrow and start tipping a little bit lower. We could get closer to 190 flats, and then we'll see how Nvidia affects this. For Amazon, we're also looking a little bit more bearish, technically speaking. We're barely at 172. I did call out yesterday that 172 would likely be coming, and lo and behold, there it is. 172 came. So the question is, what's going to happen from here? Will we continue to dump all the way down to the 160s, or will we bounce? It looks more bearish, technically speaking, but this depends on Nvidia's earnings. They're going to use that as the excuse to move this. We'll see. It does look more bearish, technically speaking, though. For Meta, we need to reclaim 520 to turn back up. Otherwise, we're at risk of dipping with the bearish divergence. I think we test 515 tomorrow. We'll see if we bounce or not. Might dip a little bit, but then Nvidia will affect that. So I think it dips and consolidates. I think that Microsoft may dip down towards the 410, then consolidate as well. And we'll see if we get a bounce or not. That also depends on different factors. Google's also dipping. We might be looking for 165 tomorrow. That's the next support right here. If we lose that, there's going to be a big dump to at least 163. And if we hold this, we could rebound. I think we dip a little bit, then we'll see what the reaction happens to be. So we'll see how things go depending on Nvidia. So everything seems to be counting on Nvidia. The dollar does look more bearish for now, which tends to be bullish for the markets, but we're getting close to 100 flat. Will we get a big bounce off 100? Because the dollar does love to bounce off that, at least historically. At least that's like a very, very strong level. So will the dollar bounce off the support it's currently at? We have bounced off the 100 range in the past. So we'll see. We're at support on the dollar. If this bounces, this could be a bearish signal for the markets. And then last but not least, we have the VIX. The VIX is dipping. We have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. It may dip a little bit more towards 14.8. So maybe it's because of the fact that the market's going to consolidate. But this dipped kind of like with a lot of stocks out there. So it's not like this is, affecting the market as much. So we'll see what happens with Nvidia's earnings. Will this cause a big bounce in the VIX or not? We'll just have to wait and see. The technicals and patterns are not everything. So we just have to be very patient. So lo and behold, guys, the markets rebound. We may dip a little bit, then consolidates tomorrow morning. But then whether or not the market breaks resistance or loses support depends on Nvidia. So we'll see how things go. I'll be back tomorrow to talk about how the charts are looking and then prepare you guys for what's happening with Nvidia's earnings. Until then, I thank you all so much for listening. I appreciate you guys for your attention. And just note that as far as the market goes, sometimes there's going to be days like this where I can't, be super objective. I can't be 100% convinced that the market will go in one direction until we see some data. And it happens, right? With CPI days, sometimes it happens. Sometimes it happens with earnings. So we just have to accept it. And I'll be back tomorrow to give you guys another more in-depth update. So until then, I thank you for listening. See you guys soon and peace out.